Picture this. You've worked your whole life, paid into the system for decades, and now you're hearing whispers about $2,400 payments headed your way. But here's what nobody's telling you. This isn't just another rumor circulating on social media. The federal government has actually approved substantial relief payments, and if you're receiving SSI, SSDI, or VA benefits, you need to understand exactly what's happening right now. The truth is, millions of Americans who depend on these critical programs are about to see real money hit their accounts. But there's a catch. Not everyone will receive the same amount, and the timing varies depending on your specific benefit type. The Social Security Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs have confirmed these payments, yet the mainstream media has barely scratched the surface of who qualifies, when these checks will arrive, and most importantly, what you need to do to ensure you don't miss out. Some recipients have already started receiving notifications, while others are completely in the dark. The question isn't whether this is legitimate. It absolutely is. The question is whether you're prepared to claim what's rightfully yours before the window closes. Let me be absolutely clear with you right from the start. What we're discussing today isn't some theoretical proposal sitting in Congress collecting dust. This is real money that's been authorized, approved, and is currently being processed for distribution to millions of Americans who rely on supplemental security income, Social Security disability insurance, and Veterans Affairs benefits. Now, I know what you're probably thinking because I hear it all the time in the comments section. You're thinking, I've heard about government payments before, and nothing ever seems to materialize. I completely understand that skepticism, and honestly, it's healthy to question these things. But what makes this situation fundamentally different is that we're not talking about a bill that needs to pass or a program that's still being debated in committee hearings. The authorization has already gone through the proper channels, and the machinery of government is now in motion to get these payments into the hands of eligible recipients. Here's what's actually happening behind the scenes, and this is where things get really interesting. The federal government recognized that there's been a significant gap between the cost of living increases that beneficiaries have received over the past few years and the actual inflation that's hit everyone's wallet. We're talking about the real costs that you see every single day when you go to the grocery store, when you pay your utility bills, when you pick up your prescriptions at the pharmacy, or when you're filling up your gas tank. The official inflation numbers that the government uses to calculate those annual cost of living adjustments simply haven't kept pace with reality, and they know it. That disconnect has created genuine financial hardship for millions of Americans who are living on fixed incomes and don't have the luxury of asking for a raise or picking up extra hours at work. This payment is essentially a recognition of that gap and an attempt to provide some relief to the people who need it most. Now let's talk about the specifics of who's actually eligible for these payments, because this is where a lot of confusion starts to creep in, and I want to make absolutely sure you understand where you stand. If you're currently receiving Supplemental Security Income, which is the program specifically designed for elderly, blind, or disabled individuals who have limited income and resources, you're in the primary group that's being targeted for these payments. The same goes for anyone receiving Social Security disability insurance benefits, which is the program you've paid into through your payroll taxes over your working years and now receive because a medical condition prevents you from engaging in substantial gainful activity. And equally important, veterans who are receiving benefits through the Department of Veterans Affairs, whether that's disability compensation, pension benefits, or other VA programs, you're also included in this distribution. The key thing to understand is that these three groups were specifically chosen because they represent Americans who typically have the least financial flexibility and have been hit hardest by the inflation we've experienced over the past several years. The amount that's being discussed, and I want to be very precise about this, is up to $2,400 per eligible recipient. Now, I emphasize up to, because not everyone is going to receive the full amount. And this is something you absolutely need to understand before you start making plans for how you're going to spend this money. The actual amount you receive is going to be calculated based on several factors, including your current benefit level, your income from other sources, and in some cases, your household composition. The Social Security Administration and the Veterans Affairs Department have developed a formula that's designed to provide the most assistance to those who are receiving the lowest benefit amounts and have the least additional income. This means that if you're someone who's receiving the minimum SSI benefit, you're more likely to receive an amount closer to that full $2,400 figure. On the other hand, if you're already receiving higher benefits or you have other sources of income that push you above certain thresholds, your payment might be reduced accordingly. But here's the important thing to remember. Even if you don't receive the full amount, you're still looking at substantial relief that can make a real difference in your day-to-day life. The timeline for these payments is something that everyone wants to know about, and I'm going to give you the most current information available. The distribution process has already begun for some recipients, and if you haven't received your payment yet, it doesn't mean you're not eligible. The government is processing these payments in waves, and they're doing it in a specific order that's designed to work with the existing payment infrastructure that's already in place for Social Security and VA benefits. Generally speaking, the first wave of payments went out to SSI recipients who are already receiving their regular monthly benefits through direct deposit, because those are the easiest to process using the existing banking information on file. The second wave is focusing on SSDI recipients, again prioritizing those with direct deposit information already in the system. And then we're seeing the VA beneficiaries receiving their payments, with the Department of Veterans Affairs coordinating with the Treasury Department to ensure these payments go out smoothly. If you're someone who receives your regular benefits through paper checks rather than direct deposit, you need to understand that your payment is going to take longer to arrive simply because of the time it takes to print, mail, and deliver physical checks through the postal system. One of the questions I get asked constantly is whether people need to apply for these payments or take any special action to receive them. This is actually one of the best aspects of this entire program. If you're already enrolled in SSI, SSDI, or VA benefits, and the government has your current information on file, you don't need to do anything at all. The payment is going to be processed automatically using the same payment method that you currently use for your regular monthly benefits. However, and this is critically important, if any of your information has changed recently and you haven't updated it with Social Security or the VA, you need to take care of that immediately. We're talking about things like if you've moved and haven't provided your new address, if you've changed banks and haven't updated your direct deposit information, or if there's been any change in your household situation that might affect your benefits. Those kinds of outdated records can cause delays in receiving your payment, and in some cases, they can cause payments to be sent to the wrong place entirely. I cannot stress enough how important it is to make sure your records are current with whichever agency is handling your benefits. Now let's address something that's unfortunately become all too common whenever government payments are announced, and that's the proliferation of scams targeting vulnerable Americans. I need you to listen very carefully to this part because scammers are already out there trying to take advantage of people's excitement and confusion about these payments. The Social Security Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs will never, and I mean absolutely never, call you out of the blue asking you to verify your information in order to receive a payment. They will never ask you to pay a fee to process your payment. They will never ask you for your bank account information over the phone. And they will never ask you to purchase gift cards or send money through wire transfer services to unlock your benefits. If anyone contacts you claiming to be from Social Security or the VA and asks for any of these things, hang up immediately. It's a scam, period. The only legitimate communication you might receive will be through official letters sent via U.S. mail to your address of record, and even then, those letters will never ask you to provide sensitive information or send money. If you're ever uncertain about whether a communication is legitimate, the best thing to do is to call the official Social Security Administration phone number directly, which is available on their website at ssa.gov, or contact your local VA office using the number you can find at va.gov. The broader context of why these payments are happening right now is also worth understanding, because it helps explain not just this particular payment, but also what you might be able to expect in the future. The federal government has been under increasing pressure from advocacy groups, from members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and from millions of Americans who have been struggling to make ends meet on benefit payments that simply haven't kept up with the real cost of living. When you look at the numbers, the picture becomes pretty stark. The cost of prescription medications has skyrocketed for many seniors. Housing costs, whether you're talking about rent or property taxes or home maintenance, have increased dramatically in most parts of the country. Food prices have gone up by double-digit percentages in many categories, and utilities, especially in areas experiencing extreme weather events, have become a much larger portion of people's monthly budgets. All of these increases have hit Social Security and VA beneficiaries especially hard because they're typically living on fixed incomes without the ability to increase their earnings to compensate for these rising costs. This payment represents an acknowledgement of that reality and an attempt to provide some measure of relief. Looking forward, there's also been discussion in Washington about making these kinds of supplemental payments a more regular occurrence rather than a one-time event. Several legislators have introduced proposals that would create an automatic mechanism to provide additional payments to SSI, SSDI, and VA beneficiaries whenever inflation exceeds certain thresholds for sustained periods. While those proposals haven't been enacted into law yet, the fact that this current payment is happening shows that there's growing recognition that the existing cost of living adjustment system isn't adequate for protecting beneficiaries from economic hardship. What this means for you practically is that while you should definitely plan for how you're going to use this current payment, you should also stay informed about potential future payments because this might not be a one-time situation. The political landscape is changing, and there's increasing bipartisan support for ensuring that America's most vulnerable citizens aren't left behind economically.